Energy Perspectives podcast hosted by Energy Dialogues. Today we're at Stanford University discussing the role of natural gas in the energy transition. My name's Naomi Boness and I'm the Managing Director of the Natural Gas Initiative and the Hydrogen Initiative at Stanford University. And today I'm joined by two fabulous guests. To my left is Elsa Valay-Paz, who is the Vice President of Gas Acquisition at Southern California Gas Company. And next to her is Sandy Grace, Vice President of Policy and Regulatory Strategy at National Grid. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So, Elsa, you're in California, and Sandy, you're in New York and Massachusetts. All three of these states have very aggressive decarbonization policies, and I would love to sort of talk about how you're thinking the role of natural gas is going to play a role, not just in meeting those decarbonization policies, but also in meeting the energy demand growth that we anticipate is going to be occurring in the near future. So, Elsa, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, great question. SoCalGas, where I have the privilege to work and serve our customers, we believe that we can leverage our infrastructure to help California accelerate its energy transition. If you think about the size of SoCalGas, we're the largest natural gas distributor in the country. We get to serve 1 in every 15 Americans, and to me, that gives us a possibility to be of impact. We believe that our system can absolutely complement the clean electron with the clean molecule to ensure that we provide the energy to our customers in a safe, reliable, affordable way. I mean, if you think about it, energy has to be a lot of things. And we are working very intentionally with multiple stakeholders to ensure that they understand the role that SoCalGas has to play. Secondarily to that, we're also focusing on developing projects that can demonstrate our capability. Hydrogen with Angeles Link, which is a proposal of green renewable hydrogen out there. If you think about it, if that came into fruition, that would allow us to deliver about 25% of our energy with hydrogen and could help decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors. So we also have renewable natural gas, where we're mandated to serve 12% of our core gas throughput by 2030 with renewable natural gas. Actually, we just filed an advice letter with the Commission with 3 projects that demonstrate the capability to do that. So I think that natural gas is here to stay, and it has a role to play in the future.
Sandy.
Well, thanks, Naomi. And I'd like to compliment what Elsa said. So National Grid provides electric and gas delivery to our customers in New York and Massachusetts, and we are a delivery company. So we deliver, natural gas on the gas side, and then on the electric side, we deliver electricity. And whenever I think about the core mandate of utility services, it really has to be safe, and it has to be reliable, and it has to be affordable. So our states, New York and Massachusetts, both are very, very strong leaders in climate policy, just like California is. And we have done multiple pathway studies in our states and in New York City looking at what would be the most cost-effective way to help the state transition to its net zero goals. And it's clear to us that, whether or not you're looking at, scenarios in which you electrify as much as possible, or you're looking at something less than that, there's a really important role that the natural gas delivery system plays in the path to decarbonization. And it does that through a couple of ways. One is that, as a system, it offers a peak shaving tool to the amount of electric that we need to build and invest in over the course of the time frame between now to 2050.
So we're not having to overbuild on our wind and solar to meet that peak demand.
That's right. And by way of example, so one of my colleagues always reminds me that in New York City, for example, he was saying our natural gas system delivers triple the amount of energy as the electric system on its peak day in the summer. So when we're thinking about how the energy, might shift from a summer peaking system to a winter peaking system, there's tremendous value for states to consider hybrid pathways to decarbonization that has an enduring role for a gas delivery system, leveraging existing infrastructure rather than building out electric infrastructure that might otherwise be avoided if you can leverage that existing gas delivery infrastructure with decarbonized molecules like hydrogen or RNG.
Amazing. I want to pause on this topic of like reliability and resiliency. I mean, obviously in the Northeast, right, we have some pretty harsh weather to deal with, and that's why in the winter, the heating demands of that area require so much power. 3 times the summer load, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But, I read a study recently, Elsa, in California, there are periods of up to 10 days where we don't have solar and wind output. And, with climate change, we're experiencing more and more wildfires that put particles in the air and prevent solar output. So can you talk about the role of resiliency and reliability in California?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been, as you said, a lot of growth with renewables, like about 43% of our energy is renewables. However, it's intermittent, right? You can't dispatch the sun and you can't control that. So yes, sometimes we have like what they call the May gray and the June gloom, and that affects solar's ability to deliver energy into the grid. However, you as an end user, you still need the energy to be there. And that's where gas comes into the equation, right? There's a couple of things that you mentioned that I think gas addresses in a very nice way. We're underground, so we're not exposed to wildfires, for example. That's something that sometimes people don't necessarily think about. Second, we have ramping capabilities, right? We support gas-fired generation, so when solar comes off, when it's available, you have peaking units that can kind of like provide energy to the grid, which is really important. A few of the things that we need to think about is 90% of the gas that sources California comes from out of state. So obviously that's a consideration. It would be nice if there was additional infrastructure to help meet customers' demand. However, we think, for example, Angeles Link, which is a new proposal, would allow to mitigate against that out-of-state, need that we have. Additionally, the renewable natural gas that I just touched on earlier relies on projects that are being developed in California. So natural gas definitely is not only offering like a benefit into the future as you're trying to develop the grid that's going to meet the 2045 net zero goal, but it actually offers value right now. The thing that we need to think about is how can we leverage our infrastructure into start increasing the blending of new fuels, renewable natural gas and hydrogen, to ensure that we can continue to provide that reliability and the value to the customers.
As we think about this journey to a decarbonized energy system, can you talk about, and maybe I'll start with Sandy this time, can you talk a little bit about the increasing need to think about the energy system holistically and how we really should be planning our pathways forward, not just as a gas utility or an electric utility, but in a comprehensive and holistic way?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Naomi. When I think as a consumer or customer, what do I essentially want? I want to be able to take a hot shower. I want to be able to wash my clothes, cook dinner. I want to be able to charge my devices. And I'd like to be able to do it in a way that's safe and it's reliable and, importantly, affordable and clean, right? So in our states, the clean piece is really important. So when I think about the affordability dimension, so I talked about the utility, really the mandates under the public service obligation of utility is to provide safe and a reliable service. Affordability is going to continue to be something that's at the forefront of, National Grid's focus, our stakeholders' interests, and our policymakers and regulators' interests as well, because we want to think about how do we get from point A to point B. It is not just a transition, it's an evolution of a period of time where we will need to make significant investments on the electric grid so that the grid is an enabler and not a blocker for conversion of heat or transportation from, traditional sources of fuel over to, electric. But in addition to that, the most affordable way that you can think about doing it is how do you economically optimize the infrastructure, the delivery infrastructure that you need to deliver clean energy to customers. And historically, utilities have not planned the systems in a coordinated manner. And what I mean by that is the electric system has been planned separately and distinctly than the gas system. And what we are working on at National Grid, and it's of interest both to our policymakers and regulators in New York as well as Massachusetts, is how do you integrate those planning functions together so that you're thinking about economically optimizing the delivery infrastructure to get customers that safe, reliable, and clean energy in the most affordable way possible. So that is an emerging area of focus for all stakeholders, but has been something that we have been working on over the last several years.
Amazing.
Yeah, if I can, I just want to add something really quickly. I think in the industry, even how we work has evolved, because I think in the past you would have people that are like, okay, you are in the power industry or the electric industry, you're in the gas industry. And right now, what it really takes to solve the issues that you're asking about, it really needs this integrated approach. So when I'm thinking about natural gas to serve my customers, I also am thinking about what are the challenges that are coming up in summer, what summer reliability looks like, what is the CAISO saying in terms of how they're going to meet the need, what does it mean to have additional energy storage available, right? And sometimes people go like, well, but aren't you in the natural gas industry? Why do you have to worry about that? Because of the complementary role that natural gas gets to play. And quite frankly, I think that additional integration conversations across states, kind of like lessons learned from other jurisdictions, would help us kind of like achieve a better energy future.
I often think it's strange that renewables and natural gas are pitched as opponents, when in reality, I actually think natural gas is one of the greatest allies for renewables, right? By providing reliability to meet the needs of the customer, we are actually able to deploy more intermittent renewables that meet our decarbonization goals. So just one more question on this topic, and you have mentioned hydrogen twice, so I'm going to get to hydrogen in just a minute. But I did want to ask, as we're thinking about this transition, right? So we live in California, which arguably has the most expensive rates to customers in the country, and we are talking about, deploying, I think I read recently, 85,000 megawatts of new renewables will be put on the grid shortly. There's clearly a state plan to reduce the amount of conventional natural gas. How do you see that impacting the cost for customers? And are there, I worry a lot about disadvantaged communities bearing the brunt of those costs. And I know SoCalGas has done a lot of work really thinking about the social impacts of the transition on its customers.
Absolutely. I mean, it would be hard for me to kind of like predict what the future will look like based on what you're describing, the, additional 80 gigawatts of renewables to serve the grid. We've done very thoughtful analysis on this because obviously we're in the middle of it, but we've partnered with academics and others to kind of like see what's the most affordable way to achieve the pathway that we have for the energy transition for our state. And we've considered high electrification, clean fuels and carbon management, no fuels. And the reality is the most affordable way, and that has been technologically proven, is to use a clean fuels pathway. You can save like about $45 billion to $70 billion if you use that approach, because literally it goes back to what I said in my opening comments about leveraging our current infrastructure, right? Now, even though the numbers of renewable penetration are big and they're significant, and obviously renewables has helped the state in a tremendous way, today about 80% of energy is sourced with natural gas. Stick with me with that number. By 2045, it's going to be 60%. So the role that natural gas has to play continues to be meaningful today and into the future.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Both National Grid and SoCalGas have done, in my opinion, incredible scientific studies, right, that are supported by work that we've done here at Stanford, really looking at, what are the alternatives and what are the trade-offs within this space. And, I always think 4 out of 5 of the atoms in a molecule of natural gas are hydrogen. So hydrogen is an obvious complement and an obvious clean fuel to support that. But I'd love to take a minute to hear about hydrogen and other technologies that you're considering in your strategies. Sandy, maybe we can go to you.
Sure. I can talk a little bit. Let me talk a little bit about renewable natural gas, because I think that with renewable natural gas, which is something that we've been looking at, we've announced we have a clean energy vision, and as part of the clean energy vision, one of the key pillars is a fossil-free network by 2050. And so in order to enable that to happen, I think, we need to really seriously consider the role of renewable natural gas and hydrogen into the mix.
Can I pause you just for a
Sure.
second? So a fossil-free vision, but that doesn't mean a fuel-free vision. So we're not talking about shifting entirely to electrification.
No, we're not. And a couple of comments on that, because there are important policy enablers that we need, in order to ensure that there is, this realization of, the decarbonization of molecules. The first one is how the molecules are regarded as from a carbon abatement value. So one of the things that we've been working with our policymakers around is the greenhouse gas accounting associated with renewable natural gas. So, what's the value of that carbon abatement? And so for utilities that purchase, our commodity, so in this case it would be gas, our regulators want us to look at what's prudent. So if you think about what's prudent, is it has to be cost effective for customers, relative to conventional alternatives. And then the second piece is there has to be some sort of recognition of the environmental attributes or the contribution to the state's goals in terms of reducing greenhouse gas, from the baseline inventory from where the states start. So, under any scenario in which, you are either looking at higher penetration of electrification or on this kind of hybrid pathway that I described, you need enabling policies. And those enabling policies are to, for utilities to either be directed to purchase these fuels and, or for the carbon abatement value and of these fuels to be recognized, as well as the costs for these technologies to really be much more competitive than where they currently stand.
Amazing. Elsa?
Yeah, very similar to what Sandy is saying. I think about it like it's almost like a formulaic approach. The future, what does it look like? You need all the tools in the toolbox. So there's a role for electrification to play. However, the reality is there's hard to abate sectors that cannot just plug in. And we're talking about industrial processes, heavy duty transportation, electric generation as well. So those are, if you think about it, those would be the targeted areas that we can serve with kind of like clean fuels. And there is policy already enabling us in California to do so. For example, Senate Bill 1440 that I mentioned earlier, we need to procure 12% of our core customer throughput. It has to be served with RNG. So to us, the renewable natural gas, the clean fuels of today, allows us to demonstrate that we can manage the system with blended gases, natural gas plus RNG, and then into the future, we could add hydrogen into the mix and talk about like 20% of hydrogen blend, right? And ultimately, the combination of all these different solutions would provide, in our opinion, the most cost-effective, resilient, safe, affordable, clean solution to serve Californians.
Yeah. I think when we're talking about, spending $44 trillion on the energy transition, not using the infrastructure that we have that has an operations team supporting it is ludicrous, right? Like, why would we just throw that out and start from scratch? It makes absolute sense to figure out how we integrate that into the solution. So we're reaching our time here. I wanted to give you an opportunity for any final thoughts, and I'll start with mine because that'll give you a chance to think about yours. I think we're here today at a university, and we're bringing together people from across all of the sectors and with very different views. And I think that I particularly am grateful to the utilities for, realizing that we have to solve this as a community, and that it is, there are a lot of challenges on the table, but that together we can hopefully find more that we agree on than don't. Because at the end of the day, I think that the world and the U.S. needs clean, affordable, reliable, secure energy, and we're all kind of moving towards that as a team. So.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, really appreciative of this opportunity. 18 years ago, I fell into the energy industry without knowing what it was going to become, and it has become such an essential part of who I am. Energy for me is a social issue, and one that we have to solve for the greater good. I really appreciate the stakeholder approach and kind of like collaboration that utilities like SoCalGas and National Grid are taking, because it's not us versus them in this kind of like antagonistic role. I think that there is fit for purpose energy for electrification, for natural gas, for clean fuels, et cetera. And I just really appreciate the opportunity that we have as leaders today to shape the future. I'm excited about it. I think this is one of the most interesting times to be a part of the energy industry, and can't wait to see what we come up with.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't, I was going to echo what you two said, but I feel the sense of purpose and optimism. I was in COP 28 in Dubai last year, and came back with this sense of optimism and commitment to this work that we're all collectively doing together to enable the energy transition. And just by way of sort of a discrete example of this idea that we need to co-create the steps to the future is in Massachusetts, for example, we're looking at a non-pipes alternative framework. So these would be alternatives to traditional forms of investments in the gas delivery infrastructure. And the expectation of our regulators is that we're doing it in a way that is a broad stakeholder engagement process. And so that we're having the dialogue with the stakeholders, well in advance of proposing something to the regulator for approval. And that public consultation process is really, really critical to ensuring that the transition is durable, it's sustainable, and it's achievable.
Wow, what a great note to end on. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Thank you to
you.
Energy Dialogues.